everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show, and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California, a writer on strike and performer who's not in SAG, so it doesn't matter. But what interesting things happened this week? AMPTP, which is the Association of all the studios, tried some more fuckery and fell on their faces. Like a bad Three Stooges short. That's about it. We're on strike still. I was on strike when I talked to today's guests, which was weeks and weeks ago, I think. It was a while ago. And still on strike today as I do this intro. But I'll tell you this, as always, every week, every time the AMPTP does something underhanded to try to break the union and to get the members to yell at the leadership, it backfires. Again, all I have in my mind is cartoon metaphors or like old shorts from the 40s, like the Three Stooges. But in my mind, it's like, you know, Elmer Fudd shooting a gun and it backfiring on him, or Wile E. Coyote, any Wile E. Coyote. But basically, they try to do that. It backfires, and then we all feel more solidarity. We all feel more hope and inspiration and more, sounds corny to say, but I'll say some love. Not romantic love, obviously, but there is more love for the union as a whole, for standing strong in the face of these people. Anyway, great episode today. This is Teenage Fanclub. Yeah, that's right, Teenage Fanclub. Been a fan of theirs for decades now. But if you don't know who they are, I'm going to redo the bio right now of my two guests, Norman Blake and Raymond McGinley. Emerging from the Scottish C86 scene of the 1980s, Teenage Fanclub formed out of the ashes of Norman and Raymond's previous group, the Boy Hairdressers. While they immediately garnered positive reviews with their first few albums, released in America on Matador, it was with their third album, Bandwagon-esque, that they broke through to a wider audience. In the 30-some-odd years since, they've never lost that original creative spark, releasing 9 more fantastic albums. And their latest, Nothing Lasts Forever, will be released next month on Merge Records. I've already heard it. It is wonderful. Mark your calendars, folks. Tell you what I do. When I know that there's an album coming out, go to wherever the Bandcamp page is, copy the link and put it right on my calendar. Just a tip. Buy people's albums, folks. Buy their albums, either physically or, if you don't have room like I do, digitally. Anyway, there's not much to say besides Norman and Raymond are delightful people. I love talking to them. We talk about growing up around Glasgow. We talk about joining the workforce around the time Thatcher takes over and expectations around, you know, careers and stuff like that from their parents. And, you know, during that time, talk about morality. You know what I talk about on this show. Good stuff. Norman and Raymond are the best. You know what else is the best? Listening to other episodes of Beginnings. Yes, my friends, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, what I like to do here in the intro is a little recommended if you like. I have been doing this show for so long, 13 years, almost 14 years now. The 600th episode is coming up in just a couple weeks. So there's a huge back catalog that I would love for you to listen to, but maybe you don't want to comb through almost 600 episodes. So what I do, I'll tell you, you know what? If you like my talk with Norman and Raymond, why, maybe you like my talk with Jad Fair. I just talked to him a couple weeks ago. He's collaborated with Teenage Fanclub. Or what about other Scottish musicians like Isabel Campbell from Belle and Sebastian, or Matthew Hurd of Seafarers, or just musicians in general. Carl Newman of the New Pornographers was just on a little while ago. A.V. Tariff Animal Collective, the same. So check out those episodes. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the show. You know, I've done hundreds of talks, not just with musicians, but TV writers and actors and comedians and artists and thinkers. So subscribe, leave a review. Why not? Also, you can find me on social media, on Twitter. I laugh because it's awful there, but I'm still writing some jokes. Or Blue Sky, I suppose. I'm also on Instagram at Andy Beckerman. Coming up soon, 600th episode. Before that, Will Oldham. That's great. Another friend of mine, Jeff Garlock of the bands Orchid and Panthers. so stay tuned for those episodes. But for now, let's talk to Norman and Raymond.
Sorry about the delay. I was at my daughter's home, her apartment. We've got family over from Canada, and there wasn't anywhere that was quiet enough for me to go, so I had to jump in the car and come here. So
no worries.
It was going to be pretty noisy in the background there.
No worries. I'm on strike, so my days are pretty flexible.
Okay, well there you go. Wow, yeah.
It's like this. And then go picketing in front of in front of a building in the hot sun. So.
Oh wow! There you go. How's that all going then? What's the dispute? What are you striking about?
Oh, so basically, like in the last 15 years, because of streaming, it has completely destroyed the ability to be a working writer.
Yeah.
So we used to get residuals from TV shows.
Oh, do you know?
Yeah.
I think we know what it is now. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know what you. Yeah, that's. Yeah, I'm aware of that. That's it's brutal. I mean, it's like it's kind of the same in the music business in terms of how things have changed in terms of not quite residuals, but our ongoing problems with Spotify and all the streaming services. It's not been easy.
Yeah, I mean exactly what's happened to musicians is what they saw how it destroyed musicians' ability to do anything, and they're like, oh great, well we can do this over in television and films now.
Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? That works. We can get away with that.
Yeah.
No, it's not good.
Yeah. They exploited, so there were like loopholes in writers' contracts for like web series and things like that. And so they started saying like, well, this is technically a web series because it's on Netflix. So we don't have to pay you the money that we're supposed to pay you. And they already were doing all this kind of financial chicanery when it came to paying people. There's a very well-known screenwriter. His name's Ed Solomon. He wrote Men in Black and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, he will put a thread up, or he will update a thread on Twitter that shows how Men in Black has never made money, supposedly, and how and every time he gets a financial statement about it, it's like almost maybe next time we'll make some money on this movie.
I mean, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. It is interesting. So I am curious, how have your attitudes towards the business part of this? Did you ever have any attitudes towards the business part of this, or was it always just like, well, that's a necessary evil that we have to deal with in order to be creative for a living? Or is it something like you've had to, like I've had to start paying attention to this stuff in the last 10 years or so?
Well, I suppose with us, the way we started the band is we went away and did the creative bit first and paid for it ourselves. Then we kind of come out of that and think, what business stuff do we need to deal with today? And we just take a slightly bemused view of it. We did then, we do now. We're just like, okay, what do we need to navigate to be where we want to be? But we've always been, fairly canny, trying not to get involved in things, that's going to cause us problems. So we are, I suppose where we are now is pretty good because, we have to pay for stuff ourselves. We have a, North American label, Merge Records, but basically, when we go away to make a record, we pay for it ourselves, we do it, then afterwards we say, hey, does anyone want to put this out? And that's what we did with our first record, and we like it being that way around. Because at the point of creation, you don't have someone with an expectation of you,
Yeah, and so people know exactly what they're getting, We'd rather that people know what they're getting. Like Raymond says, other than having some expectation, the album's going to be great, guys. Can't wait to hear it. And then we deliver it, and then they kind of like, oh shit, you know, they don't like it or whatever. So we're, you know, so like, so we send the record to the label, and if they like it, they'll put it out, and that's good. We, you know, we would rather it be that way.
Is there any kind of control aspect to it as well? Like, I hate getting notes from anyone, basically, even my wife.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the classic one in the music business. It sounds really great, but there isn't a single. You know, that's one you would get in the past, but we never have that because we sort of deliver it as a fait accompli. There you go, that's it. We're not going to change it. That's it. This is how we envisage. You know, this is how we envisage this at the start. This is what we've created. And if you'd like to release that with this artwork, that would be great. And if not, that's also fine. We'll see if someone else wants to do that.
No, we had a scenario in the 90s. We ended up in a slightly different scenario where someone was giving us money. We'd go away and make the record, then we'd give them the record afterwards. We always made sure we had total creative control on it. But we're quite, the people we worked with kind of, for the most part, left us alone to do our thing. But remember, we had our old kind of manager and tour manager, a guy called Chaz Banks, who said he'd spoken to people, I think at Geffen in the 90s, and he said, oh yeah, these guys are amazing. He said, they sit and listen politely to everything that they have to say, the label has to say, and we would sit and say, oh yeah, we'll think about that. And then we just go and do what we want, you know. But we never get into a strop with anyone. We just did what we wanted because it wasn't necessary, because we made sure that contractually we could do what we wanted anyway. So there's no point having an argument. But we would be polite and listen to what someone had to say, and then ignore them and do what we wanted, you know. But you know, you get to that position by in advance making sure that it's harder to get fucked over in the first place, you know? Right.
Now, did you purposely construct, I'm going to call it a bubble, however you want to make this into a metaphor, but like, did you intentionally construct this? Because I think there is something interesting. You know, a lot of the people I talk to on this show who have had careers for 20, 30, 40 years somehow have been able to in order to make good art, whatever they're doing, music or visual art or TV or whatever, for that time, they've been able to construct something around themselves to protect them from those kind of like business interests. So was that intentional, or was it just like, it just happened to turn out like that?
Well, it was intentional, because thinking, you know, Norman back, say, when we started, you know, Teenage Fanclub, I started thinking about this thing that became Teenage Fanclub. Say it was 1980s, we'd been in a band before called the Boy Hairdressers. We did one single, but it's kind of, you inhabit a world of, maybe you make a demo and someone plays it, you play a couple of shows, then people start having an opinion about the band, or say what the band, forming an opinion about what the band is going to be, kind of on your behalf or whatever. And when it came to doing this thing that we've been doing since 1989, we wanted to go away, make a record, not talk to anyone, not deal with anyone else's opinions outside the band, just us, as you say, in this bubble of our own making, do our thing. Then we were happy with it, then we'll take it to the outside world. So yeah, we did deliberately create that, because we didn't want to be doing our thing in reaction to other people's expectations, especially when we first started. Because, you know, you're still kind of finding your own identity or whatever. So we deliberately wanted to just go away and do our thing, and then come out with it afterwards.
Yeah, I think at that time people would, you know, go to record labels with some demos. Certainly in the UK they did, you know. They would, you know, send 3 or 4 songs to the label, and the label would come back and say, yeah, it sounds quite good, we're maybe interested in that. Can you write some more songs? Or could you maybe change those songs a little, or could you do that? And we didn't want to get involved in any of that. We thought, well, okay, we would rather, if we can get a record deal, we'll try and find some way to get the money together to release this record ourselves. So it was more about having total control of the art. You know, at that point, you know, we were very conscious of that, and we didn't want to go down the demo. You know, people. I guess the idea would be that people would think that they would send the demos and have this interaction and then come out with this big record deal and then go into a studio. We didn't want to have, you know, been involved in any of that at all. We just wanted to make an album, release it, and take things from there.
Yeah, even when it came to doing, just to take that a little bit further, we did that with the first album, Catholic Education. Then after that, we got a lot of interest from the music business, and lots of people major labels wanted to sign us, and we met loads of people, and it was, again, we were quite bemused by it, quite enjoyed the randomness of the process. But we were going to make what became the Bandwagon-esque album. But even on that album, we made the album and we finished it kind of on other people's money, but without having signed any deal with them, and then we did it afterwards. So we still managed to make that record with other people paying for it, but they didn't have any control over us at that point in time, because we hadn't agreed that we're actually going to do it. It was kind of like, oh well, if we don't agree with you, we'll just give you the money back and we'll work with someone else. So even on that record, we went away and we weren't beholden to anyone, because we hadn't signed anything with anyone until after we finished that record.
Okay, so this bemused kind of attitude, which I think is maybe one of the most healthy ways to kind of interact with the business parts of making art in the capitalist 20th and 21st century. Is that something that's like, that was part of you? Is that kind of like an attitude that was generated from the chemistry of the band, of all of you together? Or is it like, is there one of you that kind of like just has a bemused attitude and everyone else is like, yeah, that's the right way to deal with this?
Well, I think it started with me and Norman having that attitude, and we shared that. And then I think, when we brought other people into the band, they shared that attitude as well. So I think we were all quite, quite happy with that. But because that's the way we started, that's the kind of set the tone for how we dealt with everything afterwards. But definitely we had, and as well, say years ago, like in the 80s, me and Norman would sit and read the UK music press, the NME and all those things, and maybe kind of laugh at the self-importance of a lot of people, being in bands, and then suddenly they thought they were really important, their opinions were really important, and we were always bemused by that as well, in terms of the, whatever the term would be, hubris of people in bands, of, getting carried away. So we've always been kind of detached from everything. We've always taken a slightly, we've always been able to retreat to that viewpoint, because as I say, that's how we started, but we've always felt slightly outside of everything.
Yeah, I think that's a good, when I'm at my worst creative self, that makes sense as a sentence. when I am my worst creative self, it's always when I'm too interested in the outcomes of the businessy outcomes, or like, what will this do for me? Mm-hmm. Of this business than I am in making the thing, and that always then turns it into a turd. So
we try to avoid that, definitely. I mean, like for instance, we now especially, we spend all the money making the records. It's all our money, that goes into the recording. So we are quite prepared, and although it hasn't happened yet, but it could happen, that if we get to the end of that process and we don't like what we hear, or we don't like what we've done, we'll be prepared to just scrap it and lose the money. So it is all about what we produce in terms of the recording session. We want to at least to be happy ourselves with what we make. The music that we make. You never know how other people are going to react to it or receive it. But as long as we're happy with what we've done, then that's good enough for us. But at the same time, like you say, there are no expectations from anyone other than ourselves at that point. It doesn't matter if we're not, we're, like I use the word beholden. We're not beholden to anyone. No one has any expectation of what we're going to give them. We go to them after it's complete and say, "Would you like this?" And if they say yes, that's all great.
Like I don't want you to name names or anything like that, but was there someone you saw in the 80s who was like either someone who you admired and then they became like a weird creature through this process and you're like, I don't want to turn out like them, or something like that?
Well, I think we'd probably see it the other way around. I think we saw people that we saw following their own path, that we maybe wanted to do similar things, that seemed to inhabit their own world or whatever, and that could be, I don't know, I'm trying to think, say if it was in the 80s or whatever, certainly say Postcard Records and Orange Juice, things like that coming out of Glasgow, and then, maybe even bands like New Order or or something like that. People who, they were quite, very successful bands, did their own thing, but seemed like they could disappear when they weren't. They didn't seem to inhabit the cliched space of the tortured artist or whatever. I suppose maybe the whole factory records thing didn't work out so well financially for New Order or whatever, but there was the whole thing about that thing is those people were doing it, they were doing it for the, it says, like, as you were saying, when you do something with the outcome as the expectation rather than as in the financial outcome, you kind of do it to try and create something, to make something. And to an extent as well, when we were in Creation Records, in the 90s, they gave us a lot of money to make records and gave other people a lot of money to make records and didn't interfere at all, really. whether that was us or Primal Scream or My Bloody Valentine. And I can't really imagine a lot of other people doing that,
Yeah, I
think they,
Yeah, I don't think we ever had any expectation that this was going to be. We were going to do really well financially through making music. It was all about just being creative. I don't think we ever had any illusions to or ever thought that we were ever going to sell millions of records, make lots and lots of money from this. We've just never really even thought about that. Although we're still around, we've been able to pay our mortgages and rents for all this time, so that's been good. But we certainly don't. I don't have a collection of cars in the garage or anything like that.
But I think the point of you thinking about the concept of success or whatever. Success for us is feeling good about what we've done, and being able to go and do more stuff and feel good about the process and feeling, like there isn't a limitation on us making a record. Like, say, even now, it's not like we've got a massive amount of money to spend on making a record, but we'll still spend a fair amount of time in the studio doing what we want. Now, if we were to add it all up, which sometimes we don't really do, we could say, maybe there's no financial incentive to actually make a new record because maybe we're just kind of breaking even on this. Maybe we should just do be a heritage band and play the old albums and just do that and whatever. But for us, that would be failure. Success for us is at the point of feeling like we're doing what we want. And that's all we ever wanted, is to feel like, if you do something and the moment can be fleeting when you feel like you've done something that you're happy with. Because once you've done it and you're happy with it and you've finished making a record, you don't necessarily want to hear it again, not for a while anyway.
Right.
Unless you're a crazy narcissist or something, which, because we're just kind of up against our own expectations of what we can do. But, if we feel that we've done something, we think, this is, that's the point of success for us. What happens afterwards is kind of a bit of a lottery as well. You ride a wave of received wisdom, but whether people want to like what you've done now or whether they don't want to like what you're kind of coming in and out of fashion a little bit. It happens to everyone, and there's nothing you can do about that. But we've always been cheerfully promote what we do, and we quite like the process. We like going on tour, we like all that side of things. That's part of what we wanted to do when we started as well. We wanted to go out into the world and do things, and when we did that, again, when we were in the back of a van with Norman getting a mattress from his room at his granny's house, putting it in the back of the van and hitting the road, at that point we were like, this is amazing. We weren't thinking this is a slog, maybe one day we'll make it. At that point we thought we'd made it. We were loving it.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
By the way, would you want a fleet of cars? Like, I've seen Jay Leno's garage online. I've seen pictures. I'm just like, this doesn't seem fun. Just to walk into a garage full of old cars.
No, it's not something that's ever appealed to me. No, definitely not. No, although I did have an old, a nice old Morris Minor. I don't know if you know what that is. An old sort of 60s British car. It was really great. That was so it was a nice sort of vintage car. I don't think I spent a lot of money buying it, and not that much maintaining it either. But that was my only foray into sort of vintage or whatever esoteric cars. I guess they made millions of them anyway. So it's but no.
Where the part of the world we live in, if you have a vintage car, you spend half the time trying to demist all the windows, So maybe if we moved to somewhere sunny or something, but not here.
Although the band collectively has a collection of vintage cars, just not us individually. We have the Lamborghini, the 60. No, we don't.
Okay, so what I'm getting a picture of, like, part of what helped was not having certain expectations at the beginning. Did you have other ambitions, though, in your life when you were younger? Were there things you wanted to do, or was it always from a young age, I want to play music, I want to be in a band?
Personally speaking, it was always music that I wanted to do. I left school. I didn't go to university. I went straight from school into like sort of menial jobs, playing lots of music. I was, the first touring that I did, I was quite young. I was maybe 20, 21 when I went out on tour with a band called the Pastels. Mm-hmm. And that was a big European tour. And so right from then, round about the age of 20, I was straight into, being in bands and touring. And I quite liked it. And like Raymond said, just, chucking the mattress in the back of the van and heading off was very appealing to me. And I kind of thought, this will do for me. I'm going to keep doing this for as long as I can. I know Raymond went to university, but
because I as a kid, like Norman was as well, kind of obsessed by music. I liked the idea of being in a band, but or doing something related to that, or doing something creative. But I was pretty good. I did pretty well at school, and I was good at maths and physics and all that kind of stuff. And I went to university and studied engineering, civil engineering, basically, building things and, roads and bridges and, buildings and stuff. And I did that, and I kind of enjoyed it. I was pretty good at it. But maybe when I was about, I went and did that when I was about 17. Maybe by the time I was 19, I kind of thought, nah, I'm not going to do this for a living. I just want to be in a band or something, and I kind of made that decision then, probably when I was about 19. I thought, that's maybe a crazy idea, but no, I'm just going to do that. And I kind of finished my university course, but I didn't apply for any jobs or anything. I just decided I was offered, some things. I was offered a job working in the Channel Tunnel, which is a big infrastructure project. And stuff around there, but I decided no, it's like I had no money at that point, and I thought, if I get a job, I'm going to get seduced by money, and I'll never be able to give it up. I thought, no, I'm just going to try and do this. At some point I'll do something in music. I don't know when, but I'll just kind of be broke until then. But it was fine. I was perfectly happy with my existence at that point. And I've never made money from anything other than being a musician, other than being a paper boy when I was at school. I've been a paper boy, a student, and a musician. Those are the only things I've ever done. I've never had any kind of job whatsoever.
And actually, funnily enough, the job that the one sort of serious job, when I say serious, one that was in for an extended period of time. I worked in a music shop in Glasgow, a famous music shop in Glasgow called McCormick's Music, and it was near the Apollo Theatre, which was a famous theatre there, so all the bands would come in there. So, that I was doing that from the age of 17 to 19. So I was still involved in music at that early age, and that was amazing. Actually, I met some incredible people. I met John Martin in there. He came in one day looking for guitar strings, and someone nudged me and said, he doesn't pay for them. I was like, okay. And so he said, can I have a set of those, the Darios or whatever? And I gave him the strings, and he said, how much is that? And I said, "Oh, nothing, John." And he's like, "Thanks, wee man." So yeah, there you go. But that was an interesting job, and I got to play all the instruments and whatever, So.
Actually, I remember another story about McCormick's. Now, I can't remember whether you told this. It might have been before your time, Norman, or someone else told me this. The Devo came in to buy a guitar.
Oh, right.
I heard the story that Devo were playing at the Apollo in Glasgow. This would probably be 79 or something like that, or 80, can't remember.
Yeah.
And they came in and bought a guitar, but they got a saw and sawed a bit off of it. In the shop or something.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I think that
was in McCormick's.
That's the story, yeah. They sawed a bit of the guitar. Yeah, that's perfect now. We'll take it. And also, I think previously, though, when the Beatles had played at Green's Playhouse, all the amps went up from McCormick's up to the venue. So it had an amazing history of the place, and it was great fun working in there. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, by the way, Devo sawing a guitar. Who's cleaning up the sawdust?
I know, yeah, well if I'd been working there, it would probably been me because, I was the kid. Norman, go and get the, whatever.
Go and clean up Devo's sawdust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So wait, okay. Two things then. Norman.
Yeah.
Did your parents have a problem with you deciding to pursue music? Well, let me just go with that first. Then, Raymond, I have a similar question for you.
Yeah, sure. No, they didn't actually. In fact, I think my mum even encouraged me to go into McCormick's to go, to ask if they were looking for anyone. I think I'd maybe mentioned it to her. I mean, it's such a long time ago, but she said, "Well, yeah, go in and she may even have called them, and said, oh, look, are there any, and I think they said, yeah, send them in for an interview." So they were encouraging, and it was work as well. It was because it was really difficult to get work around that time. I mean, especially here in the west of Scotland, it was really difficult. It was the, the coal mining and heavy industry had been the main, what had been sort of big here, and that was all kind of dying off. And there was high unemployment, so I was lucky to get something. So they were just happy that I had found a job somewhere and was, had a 9 to 5 and was bringing in some cash.
Yeah, I guess I really didn't think about that, but you're going into the workforce as Thatcher is taking over.
Yeah,
and just kind of like turning the UK into the same. I mean, same thing Reagan did here in America.
Well,
which
it seemed to me at the time that there was no. I mean, I didn't really pursue education at all in a way, and I didn't do well at school. I mean, I left school. I left as soon as I could because I thought, what's the point? I won't be able to get any work anyway. I'd lost interest in everything because I didn't see any future. And perhaps that's maybe why I kind of doubled down in terms of becoming a musician and working at that. Although I can never remember sort of playing and learning guitar being a chore, it was always very pleasurable. I never thought, right, I need to get in there and sit for 5 hours because I got to get my chops up here. I didn't think about it that way, but I just knew that it was something enjoyable. And then I eventually realised, actually, I could maybe do this. I may not make any money, but I'm not that interested in that, but I'll have something to do. And I suppose working in the music shop was, in a way into that as well, but yeah, like I said, unemployment was awful then, just awful. There were, knowing that not many people and I know that from Raymond's school too, not many people would have got. Raymond would have been a bit of an anomaly going to university from your year. Would I be right in saying that, Raymond?
Yeah, definitely.
So it was the same at my school.
I mean, Raymond, was the decision to go to university, did that come from inside? Was there pressure from your parents to do that?
There was no pressure from my parents. My brother had gone to. My brother is 4 years older than me. He went to university before me, but he lasted a year and then he dropped out. So I went to university, but there was no pressure. It was just kind of like, oh well, I mean, I remember it was funny, being from my background or socio-economic background or whatever. There was no expectation in my school that people would go to university or do that. I remember, like you'd see there'd be careers advisors would come round. I remember a particular time, maybe I was 15 or something, 16, and some careers advisor coming into the school and saying, yeah, well, maybe those people that might like to work with your hands or work in a garage, you might get some manual labour, or might be other people that like to, get dressed up. You might work in like the office in a supermarket, or maybe get a job in a bank or something. There was no chat about, and you might want to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever. That expectation didn't exist. But partly for me, it was like, I did pretty well at school. I liked doing exams and doing that kind of stuff. I thought, well, I'll go to university. I was 17, It didn't occur to me to take a year, I didn't know, but people might take a year out before going to university, because I didn't come from the background. No one else in my family had been to university. My mum worked as a cleaner in a school. My dad at that point worked, he fixed vending machines, cigarette machines, and he'd worked in a scrapyard and worked as a demolition worker and a bus driver and stuff. So, that was, most of my, I didn't know anyone that had been to university. I didn't know, there weren't any, anyone, I didn't have any references to anyone who had been through that system, other than my brother had done 1 year, then dropped out. So I was just in the unknown. But it also seemed like, I kind of fancied it. And I had a thought, like Norman said, I was a bit like it would be at his school. I was probably a bit of an anomaly from my school to go to university. But I thought, I'm going to go to university and it'll be interesting. I'm going to meet lots of really, really clever people, And I went to school, went to university, and I thought, no, these people seem much the same as they did at my school, but they come from better off backgrounds. They come from like middle class backgrounds and, slightly better off things. And I thought, but they kind of grew up probably with schools that had an expectation that you would get better grades and you'd go to university, and that was the expectation. That expectation didn't exist at my school at all. It was like, oh wow, you need to be really clever if you're going to go to university, whereas somewhere else, a couple of miles down the road, it'd be like, what? It'd be a disaster if you can't get to university, Yeah,
there was sort of pressure on those people. Ironically, they had those kids would have had pressure on them, But it's the same for me. No pressure from my parents to do that at all, and they were, they were just happy that I got some work.
Yeah,
but from my parents, they would probably like to say, oh well, it's good if you can go to university and get that. They would probably think of people. The only people they knew that maybe done that kind of thing might be teachers. Or my mum works as a school cleaner, and she knew teachers, and she probably thought, oh, they've got quite a nice life. They don't have to work. I think teachers work quite hard. But, you probably thought, compared to, say, my dad, it's like he would have to go out working on a Saturday and a Sunday to get extra money, and you have to, maybe people that might have a job, a manual job, would have work for a firm, and then they'd go working in their own jobs, and they'd be working really long hours and to try and make some extra money. Whereas, my mum and dad would see people that were professionals leading maybe a more dignified existence and thought, oh, that'd be quite nice. But they had no expectation of me, anything for me at all. They just wanted me to do what I want. So when I finished university and didn't get a job, they weren't like, what are you doing? You've wasted all your education. They were just like, yeah, whatever you want to do, that's fine. There was zero expectation or pressure from them about anything at all.
Now,
and it's funny. Sorry, just thinking of Thatcher and privatisation of public utilities and all that kind of stuff. When we started the band, when we were making the Catholic Education record, round about that time, after we'd recorded the record, my mum worked as a school cleaner employed by the local authority. She was made redundant by the local authority. She'd worked in this job for years because they were getting private companies in, because it's like, hey, they're just cleaners, you can get anybody to do it. So they were, bringing in private companies to provide those kind of services. My mum was made redundant, and she'd got some money, not much money, but but we kind of, maybe this was, I can't remember when, maybe this was slightly later, maybe after Catholic Education had come out, but I think we might have used that money to go to
US.
We used it for something related to the album, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But things were partly funded by, a small amount of money.
Was that, perhaps something in the US when we went to America?
Yeah, I think we went to America. We used some of my mum's redundancy money. She was like, well, you might as well, if you want to go and do this, son, well, there's some money, you can go and do that. And we went off to New York, to meet record labels or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but partly the process of Thatcherism led to led to part of that happening.
Okay, so well, wait. First, Norman, what did your parents do for a living when you were growing up?
Okay, so they were news agents. They had a kind of small general store, and that was it. But they worked long hours. So I would sometimes help out, but it was that's a tough life. That of course, in some ways that is gone now because people don't buy newspapers when they go to work. But then everyone bought a newspaper, cigarettes. So they would make the money from newspapers and cigarettes. But I would sometimes help out, and it would be you're opening that store at 5 a.m. or you're in there at 5 a.m. because you would have orders. You'd write people's names on the newspaper that they would get. You'd have to sort all that out. But so that and then you would work long hours. They didn't open late into the evening, but they would 6 a.m. to like 7 p.m. It's a long day, and then you go sleep and then you go up and do it again. So I worked a little bit in there, and that was quite enjoyable. You got to know lots of people. You would as people would come into the store, you would have their newspaper. You'd see them coming. You'd have their newspaper and their cigarettes, and you'd hand them to them. You get this little rapport going with people. So I enjoyed doing that. But yeah, that was what they did for years and years and years. And actually, before they retired, my dad had a job. Actually painting because he was a painter-decorator when he was a kid. And when he was really like 17 or 18, and he ended up painting sort of porta cabins, that was one of his last jobs, but but they worked long hours, it was a pretty tough life, but
yeah. So, do you think it was a combination of Thatcher kind of just destroying the ability for people to have a future, and also the fact that your parents did they? Well, I guess what I'm trying to think is, did they have expectations prior to Thatcher? Were there thoughts of like, oh, my children are gonna go do this? And then suddenly Thatcher comes along, and it's just like, oh, I don't even know what's going to happen now. Or was it like they didn't have expectations at all, and they let you be who you wanted to be?
I think so. In some ways, I think it's partly because if both of us are from, I think you say this town that I'm actually my parents just now. It's a place called Bells Hill. It's sort of on the outskirts of Glasgow, but it's pretty impoverished. It's pretty run down and a bit grim. I'm being quite honest. And it was especially grim back then, and so no one was expected to really get a job. There were a couple of big steelworks here. So British Steel had a massive place quite nearby, and a lot of people worked there. But other than that, you weren't expect. If be menial jobs, or if you were lucky, be an electrician or something like that. But that was it. There wasn't. There was no expectation to do anything, whatever, like anything in the professional realm or whatever,
I think the other side of that as well is, certainly, I would say that my parents wouldn't have been thinking about Thatcher or politics or anything. They were just trying to make a living,
right,
and probably didn't have any overview or opinion about that. Or, beyond, not trusting people like that, But also the other side of, say, when we were born in the 60s, and I think the era that we grew up in, though we both lived in, places that were, lower on the socio-economic scale, there probably was a slightly more utopian sense that people could do things artistically, creatively, or whatever. The social structure seemed a bit more flattened then, or at least there was a naive expectation that maybe there was more possibility. and there was probably slightly less of a, you know, I'm kind of thinking, we grew up in, an era of, like, say, people like the Beatles or whatever, or people coming out.
David Hockney, someone else, working class. David Hockney, working class guy who suddenly becomes this massive, iconic artist or whatever. And, and the Beatles, of course, again, working class. You do the tour of in Liverpool of their homes. And, people talk about, John Lennon was sort of middle class. I mean, it's a nice house, Auntie Mimi's house, but it's not that amazing, They weren't wealthy, So yeah, in that sense, yeah. In terms of creativity, you did think that, well, okay, there's a way out of this. It's almost like it's a bit of a fantasy or whatever. You create this fantasy around through music and art. But it could also get you out of the, like say I was here in Belsill, it was a means or a way to get out of this town and sort of see a bit more of the world.
Yeah, and and the other thing is, as well as I think there was probably more confidence among, say, the working classes at that point than there is now. There's a lot of people, I think, look down on and categorise people from certain backgrounds and might think they have an opinion about what their aesthetic sensibilities are, their lives are. I'm sure that's always existed, but that seemed a bit more flattened coming out of the 60s into the 70s. There was more of the utopian ideal that you might be moving towards something where people had more opportunities. And certainly we grew up with, say, BBC Two television. You could sit in a council flat and watch, like, art films on TV at night and stuff, and lots of people would do that. It wasn't like, people were kind of, in Glasgow as well, as a place where people would be kind of self-educated, whether it's books or films or music or whatever. There's a lot of stuff. It's not like, I kind of feel like now people look down more, like, say, where I grew up now, I would be more looked down on now than I was then, and I think there's probably less self-confidence amongst youth or whatever from my kind of background now than there was then,
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's become very polarized, and in that polarization, there has been this kind of, all right, if you're working class, then, like, in America, it's like, working class, well, then obviously you like Donald Trump and MAGA and all that kind of stuff. And there's no way you could ever like any kind of art or, you're, at least I don't know, again, the UK that much, besides the fact that I watch a lot of UK television and music and films and such like that. But I don't know the actual, what it's like. But, like, it feels like that it's stereotyped as, like, UKIP, Nigel Farage, Brexit types. That is working class. And
yeah, because people, there are externally imposed, standards or expectations of what someone that looks a certain way, maybe dresses a certain way from a certain background, that what they are all about, But like all those things, the generalisations are dangerous and inaccurate, And it was interesting thinking of music, say, in the 70s when I was growing up, and we, Norman, have spoken about this. You'd have these sage older people, whether it's someone's older brother or sister or some hippie guy that had, like, seemed to know everything about music, but there was a kind of underground of stuff, and you kind of think, looking back, how did people know all this stuff?
I know it's I think about that too. You think about I think about myself personally. How did I hear music? Where did I hear this? It's kind of lost in the mists of time. But you did, like Graham said, there were people around who would turn you on to things. Oh, you like that, wee man? You should go and check out this band. And of course, it would be difficult to check out that band because we didn't have things like streaming services. I've been sort of castigating them, but the one great thing about streaming services is that you now have instant access to all of that music. So if someone tells you about something, you can go and listen to it immediately, you know, and that's something that I would have loved back then. But we did manage to find things then. You know, you would use libraries. You know, you would word of mouth. People. I mean, I guess cassette tapes were around by the time we were kids, and you know, so people would make you compilations and stuff. But BBC is amazing actually. BBC. I mean, it's worth the license fee. We pay a license fee for that here. But you had people like John Peel on there. They would have great nighttime shows. They would have paid for sessions by bands. So bands would go and record music sessions, and they would pay the bands money for those sessions, you know. And everyone did those sessions. So, and it's a great archive. But that was the way to hear music then, and word of mouth. And then I guess that's where fanzines come from. You know, that people would create fanzines, sell them in record stores, and you know.
But I think as well, it's like, you know, like you were saying about having, you know, a perception of, say, someone from working class background. People might have an anticipation of what they will be all about or whatever, what they'll like. But I think you never know what anybody's outlook or aesthetic sensibility is, regardless of what their background is. I mean, I think what people from better backgrounds learn to do is have a few reference points that they might be more socially useful about art or literature or theatre or whatever, but they might not be any more into that stuff than anyone else, and maybe doesn't have the references. But, you know, as a kind of, you know, hesitate to tell this story, but, you know, there's a relative of mine who was in prison for a while, and I met him at a funeral, and I was talking to him, and, you know, I didn't really know him, you know, but he was saying, "Oh, I didn't know anything about your band. So the guys in the jail turned me on to your band." So, you know, you got like a cohort or whatever of people in prison who like music, and, you know, and he's like, "I didn't know it. I was just into, you know, Pink Floyd and Bob Marley and all that." I said, "But the guys in the jail turned me on to your band." You know, within any subset of humanity, whatever it is, people will have, you know, unexpected things that they talk about that they like, whatever nuanced views they have on things or whatever. And, you know, I think things are becoming increasingly more like which of the two accepted positions on something do you belong to or adhere to, you know, and that's really, it's really bad. Even sometimes people that I might agree with, I don't, there's something about the concept of like-minded people that's really weird. You know, yeah, we're all like this and they are all like that, and they are not like us. That's weird, you know.
Yeah. I generally think that people, like, when you get to the particular person, are definitely weirder and more varied than whatever the kind of like cultural projection you have in your head of them is going to be. And then you put that on them and you turn, like, it's like a cookie cutter onto a human being. But then you still got all the dough on the out. This is a terrible metaphor, but I think it works. You still got all the dough on the outside. That's them. But all you're looking at is the cookie part.
Oh no! So I always my mother just came in. I think she was maybe wanting to go to the bathroom, but she just caught my eye there as you were midway through that. So I wasn't being rude, and so I just getting lost in you know. So I sort of missed that. I'm really sorry.
But I think I mean,
it's a great metaphor. You missed a fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody's, you know, and I think everybody's more complicated than you think they are, you know.
I mean, we must all have an experience of meeting someone, and they, you know, after you get chatting with them, you kind of, you just discover so much about them, or you know, at least we have these expectations of, you know, that thing when you see someone. And you create, or you have an idea immediately or instantly in your head what they're going to be like, and then of course that can very often turn out to be completely wrong. And I've had that experience many times. You know, I'm trying to think of somewhere recently. Sometimes it can be someone's voice, which is terrible in a way. I met a guy recently who had a very heavy Scottish, like West of Scotland accent. and then he started. And I didn't know when I got chatting with him, but he was a doctor. But he was with another doctor friend of mine. But I didn't realise this guy was a doctor, and they started talking about I don't know, whatever it was way above my head in terms of medicine or whatever. It was some kind of. Mm-hmm. It was about some procedure, that I'd know. But as soon as so I wasn't expecting this to come out of this guy's mouth, and it did. And and I kind of thought to myself, wow, you really got that wrong there. No, and I don't think I was intentionally trying to judge. I wasn't thinking anything bad about him, but I just wasn't expecting that to be the conversation that he would start, or
No, yeah, no. There is this we humans get conditioned, I think, and it just depends on if you're not. How much energy you have, and if you're lazy or not, whether you will expend the energy to see past whatever that cultural expectation is. I used to do improv comedy in New York, and I know that when people wanted to play a dumb character, they would put on a Southern U.S. accent.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine who was from North Carolina is like, hey, can you guys stop that? And we're like, oh, okay. Yeah. So then if I was going to be a physicist, then I would put on a Southern accent just to try to force myself out of that. And then
that's right. I always think, it's when people talk about we judge people by the way they dress. I always say to people, who the Cray twins are? They're sort of notorious London gangsters from the 60s. And David Bailey took a famous photograph of them. Whenever people talk about we judging people by the way they look, I always say to them, the Cray twins wore Savile Row suits. It's like so their suits would have cost whatever at the time, £2,000 or whatever. But so it's really not a good thing to judge people. Or that first impression is not usually very accurate.
Right.
And it's not a good way to make a judgment on someone. And like you say, we all do it. And that, I totally know what you're saying about that thing about the, in the US, somebody using the a Southern accent to portray a character in a certain way. It's not good, but we definitely do it. So it's good to be conscious of these things and try not to do it,
But I think that's the thing I'm getting from talking to you both for the last, 45 minutes or so, is that you were both very conscious or self-aware people from an early age, it seems. You went into making music kind of understanding what the situation was or having a thought about wanting to, all right, we're just going to make the kind of music we want to make, and then we'll figure it out from there. You kind of understood what the structures were of the business, at least, to know how to avoid certain things. And I'm curious, when you were growing up, when you were teenagers, were you self-aware? Were you conscious of yourselves or of the circumstances? Or is that just something you gained as you started to make music?
I think, well, I suppose it's maybe a bland thing to say, or maybe everyone is, but I think we are, we're fascinated by people and the different types of people you meet, and, humanity generally and all that kind of stuff. And, but, you think, well, maybe everyone is, but not everyone gets to talk about it in this context, afterwards, I'm, so you have to be wary of thinking, okay, I'm in a band, so therefore, I'm doing being in a band doing an interview, so therefore I have, I think everyone, well, is everyone not kind of like that? But, but I suppose I feel like I have always felt a certain detachment from, observing things, and people and people's. I can remember being. It's funny. I remember being at primary school, say when I was 5 or 6 or something. I'd go to school and I'd make friends with maybe a couple of people, and then go away for the summer holidays, which is about 6 weeks, and come back for the next year. And I remember kind of going to the same people, and I felt like a couple of them had kind of forgotten the friendship, And I remember at the time thinking, that seems really weird, because I can kind of remember everyone that was in the class, and all these people that, you've just gone to school and you met all these people, and with some people there that, then you look back and think, well, did they forget, or had they feigned to forget, or had somehow, I just remember feeling like, this is kind of weird. That, I feel like I remember all this stuff and other people don't remember. Like I could remember everything that had happened the year before, and other people seemed like they couldn't remember. Yeah. I remember feeling a little like, am I kind of weird because I'm the one that can remember everything we did last year?
Yeah, I get that. I've always had this anxiety because I have I was going to say too much of a good memory. Whatever. I don't know how you want to classify it. But I remember meeting people who don't remember meeting me, or remember having like certain things, like certain friendships and things like that, or like embarrassing moments in my life that everyone else has forgotten about, but I hold on to. And it causes anxiety. And I'm wondering if that's the same for you, because it seems like you are both the same kind of person, but you also seem much emotionally healthier than me. And I'm wondering.
Well, in terms of, I think we probably have a similar worldview. I think we're optimistic people as opposed to being pessimistic. We're not. We're. I don't think we're cynical. Mm-hmm. I think we. I think we like to be fair in terms of the way we deal with people. And I think we're, I'm trying. These are all sort of really positive things.
Yeah, I can remember being a kid, and again, this has been really young, and getting a lot of fights because I felt like somebody was doing something that was wrong, or taking something off of someone, and ended up getting into all these fights with people. And I think I had an overdeveloped sense of righteousness. I was probably a right little pain in the arse. And then these people would come to the house, and my mum would say, so-and-so, Paul's mum was there and said that you beat him up, and I said, yeah, but he deserved it, but this is probably when I was 7 or something, but I probably grew out of that, not long afterwards, but I kind of felt like, I think we are empathetic to seeing other things that happen. It's like Norman's probably the same. Sometimes you see these clips on the internet of somebody falling over, and you see somebody does something that's either really embarrassing or, I find them almost impossible to watch because I think, oh, that's so painful. You can't, or so embarrassing. You can't. It's just, I can't even look at that.
Yeah, you're enjoying someone's discomfort or whatever. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Yeah,
but it is. I think it's like, I don't know. We'll definitely engage with people wherever we go. We're conscious of local sensibility. That's the thing you have to be careful of as a musician when you travel around the world. If you're in the Basque Country or in Catalonia or whatever. So we're always conscious about. We always like to know where we are that way and be aware of that place. I remember years ago we played in Berlin. It's a big show, a place called Ostbahnhof, and so at the sound check, I came out for the sound check, and on the monitor right in front of me, in giant letters on a piece of A4 paper, it said Berlin, and I kind of thought, who the fuck doesn't know they're in Berlin? It's the fact that you would have to have that on your monitor. There could be some places, if you're on a long tour, some small town, you're in there for one, and you're like, where are we? Well, yeah, I kind of know where we are, but I remember thinking, Berlin, you've got to know that you're in Berlin, unless that person was really, really out of it, I don't know. But we're curious about the places that we go. We like to learn about them and be knowledgeable about them as best we can. You can't always know everything about a certain place, but it's a good way to learn about about politics in different parts of the world. There is a thing, I suppose, going back. It's that people, will make assumptions about you because of where you come from. I won't get into the debate about this, but people in Scotland would say, well, you must be, in favour of independence, or you must hate the English or whatever, so people. So I'm always very conscious about not making those assumptions about people in other places, because you get it so wrong. Local politics are really nuanced. And, I don't know anything really. I know a little bit about, maybe in the US it's a little different because you see US news everywhere. People know about the United States, and they know about the politics of it. It's the biggest country in the world, and most powerful country in the world. So inevitably, you're going to learn quite a bit about a country like the United States. But there are other places that you don't know anything about, and like I said, you don't know anything about the political sensitivities of that region. So I think going back to my original point, we're conscious of things we try to be conscious of things like that when we travel.
Yeah. So, okay, we're right at the end of the show, and there's just like one or two little things I'm trying to figure out still. So you were both grew up pretty empathetic. Were your parents empathetic people and you learned that from them? Is it just the way you were set up? Like, where do you think that empathy comes from?
I think probably I think that quite a lot of how you are comes from your home setup, your background, your home life when you're a kid. I mean, my parents were, and I'm very much working a lot of the time. They would come home and they would pretty much fall asleep in front of the TV. But there wasn't a lot of friction in my home life. It was pretty. I had a good life. I really enjoyed being a kid. I mean, my parents were news agents. I got access to all the comics and all that.
Uh-huh.
What amazing. My sister. I've got one sister. She was happy. So we had a pretty good life, I think, really, and I had a normal life in terms of, lots of friends and would go out and hang out and play football. I was pretty easygoing and pretty laid back, not a care in the world. That would sum me up as a kid.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, my parents would be, and growing up in the west of Scotland, there's Catholic schools and non-denominational schools, and and me and Norman were on the opposite side of that. And the schools that we went to, we didn't know each other then, but sometimes you could get detached in a bubble from the other side, And my parents would always be make sure that, thought those people are good people. They're not, my parents weren't really religious, so probably more cultural Catholics or whatever. They were kind of brought up that way and went along with it, but they kind of both made sure that, I wasn't bigoted in any way towards other people with different beliefs or whatever, And they were very much like, oh, you should take people as you find them. And also, I remember my mum saying, my mum and dad both went to Catholic schools run by, say, priests or sisters and nuns or whatever, and some of them were strict and some of them were kind of horrible. Mm. And, my mum saying, be wary of the holy people. Watch out for the holy people. They go to church in their Sunday best and they act like they're really self-righteous and then they're horrible to everyone the rest of the week. Watch out for those self-righteous people. Be careful of the self-righteous people. They are the ones that aren't to be trusted. And also, just because someone's a policeman or a priest or a teacher or whatever, they don't have, should have respect to an extent, but they shouldn't be completely trusted. You should be wary of everyone. No, it's not like my parents weren't anti-authoritarian, but just in a grassroots sense of, be wary of, just be a little wary of people that try and tell you what you're meant to do or what you're meant to think, just in an everyday sense. But certainly, on the thing of watch out for the holy people, and people are holy in ways other than religion. Whether it's holy in other senses of self-righteousness or whatever, and all kinds of things. And certainly I was brought up to be very wary of those people. Do
you think that added or pushed you aside a little bit? It gave you that kind of detachment that you had been talking about from the other people in your school?
Well, I had two sets of friends when I was a kid. One was all the friends I had at school, and the other one was all the friends I had at home. I lived slightly further away from the school, and the friends I had at, say, secondary school particularly, they lived somewhere else, and I had all these other friends at home, and they went to the other school, what we would call colloquially the Protestant school or whatever, but it's actually non-denominational schools. So I had a whole two groups of friends from both sides of all that west of Scotland stuff, different levels of bullshit within both camps, Yeah, so because I was dealing with both of those things every day, one kind of thing during the day, one thing at night or at the weekend, I saw both sides of it, and I could see through the bullshit from both sides, because I dealt with, but also that both sets of people were actually okay. They were my friends in both camps.
Yeah, but it's, we grew up in the west of Scotland. It's still there, the bigotry or whatever, the sectarianism and whatever. But like Raymond, I had friends that went to the Catholic school as well. I just didn't choose my friends. I didn't care. It just never bothered me at all. I just wasn't interested in that. And actually, what you realise is that people are exactly the same. Of course they are. But I kind of learnt that lesson pretty early on as a kid. I didn't choose my friends through what their religion was. I chose them because I liked them or I got on with them, or we had similar interests or whatever. Music mainly being one of them, but it's an awful thing, and you see it all everywhere. Othering them, us, we hate that. I mean, that's one thing we definitely have in common. We hate that as a collective. Them and us. Who are them, and who are we? And it's just horrible,
right?
Because as kids, we grew up around that. It was a thing,
Yeah.
And I could see bullshit on both sides of that, and you deal with it. You walk down the street, and maybe someone you didn't know would come up to you and say, "What school did you go to?" And you're like, you kind of. It's like And you say it might be the wrong answer,
Yeah, in Scotland, that's the way of working out what religion you are, right? So that's and yeah, so it was horrible growing up around that, but like I say, it was not something that interests me or ever did interest me. But you could see a lot of people get, that would be how they viewed the world, what their worldview was. They would still look at it as them and us, and it's still here in this little town, It's still here. People drink in separate pubs, most people don't, but those people are still around, but it just never made any sense to me at all. I just don't understand that at all.
Yeah. Okay, then final question. What insulated you from turning into those kind of people?
I don't know, maybe just a bit open-mindedness. I think just being open to things, and people that I met, I mean, this isn't always the case, but I guess people who are interested in the arts or being creative maybe aren't so interested in defining themselves by their religion or whatever,
probably
I think it was...
Yeah, it probably also requires a certain degree of confidence to do your own thing and not be, because, in the street where I grew up in, I could see... there's some people, who I thought were pretty bad, pretty horrible people, and then other people that kind of went along with them because they were kind of too scared to separate themselves,
Yeah, there'll be people there who are saying, I really don't agree with this, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to not say anything and just stay, and I'll be safe here. It's a bit scary. If I'm thinking about breaking away from my peer group here, then that's going to be a bit scary. So I'll just not say anything. There must be loads of people out there that just think that's utter bullshit. Yeah, that's horrible. There's nothing wrong with those people. They're exactly the same as me, or whatever, whether it be the colour of their skin, anything. I've never understood that, any of that stuff. It's just bullshit,
Yeah.
But it's a lot of it, people just, it's lack of confidence. People feel safe in the collective of whatever the collective bullshit is. People feel safe in it, and don't want to be the weird one that says, "Oh, hang on a minute, those other people are okay,"
Yeah. There's a reminds me. I'll say one last thing. It reminds me of a commercial. I think it was for the Times. It was a TV commercial that they did, and I'll try and do this as quickly as possible. So what you see is like a kind of businessman, right, standing, in the street, and you see a skinhead running towards him at a rate of knots. He's sort of barreling towards him. And and there's a voiceover at this point, and it talks about it's never really it's not a good idea to judge or I can't remember the text, but it's worth tracking down. As it's in slow motion, as the skinhead gets closer to the person, the camera pulls back to reveal a hod or like a lot of bricks on like some kind of stand, and it's fallen over, and the skinhead is pushing the guy out the way of the bricks, But so it's. I think I wish you could remember punches, but you should always look at things from a few different angles. To get the real story. I explained that really poorly, but if you Google it, I think it's either the Times or the Guardian. It's a good commercial. It's from the 80s, I think, or the early 90s, and always thought that was really good.
Yeah. Okay. So then, real last question: what made you confident people that you could be your own person, your own people, as opposed to being the lackey for some bully or something like that?
I think it's been fearless in some ways, and that, just to sort of, you have to have a bit of courage. You have to be prepared to just say, right, I'm not having that. I don't like that, and I'm not going to go along with it. So you have to make a conscious effort to do that. So I think it's being fearless. Maybe fearless is too strong a word,
but there is a thing where, and kind of, although what we do is a load of inconsequential bullshit, you could say, but there is something about writing songs and putting them out. You kind of have to stick your head above the parapet a little bit, and people might have a go at you. It does require a certain. You think, oh well, fuck it. You're going to go and do what you want, and other people are going to say stuff, and it's not going to have any effect on us. So it does require a certain. But but it does. Back in, sometimes I look at sometimes people that say come from my. People want to conform. It's safe to conform. It keeps people happy and safe, and they don't need to break out or whatever. I mean, I can remember. This is a really weird thing to say, right? In my street, I went. It's a kind of fairly elitist pursuit, right? But from my school, there's some teachers that like to go skiing, so they took us skiing, and up to this place. It was like an army base up in the north of Scotland. And I learned how to ski with these like army guys that were, I don't know what they were doing up there, some special forces guys or something. But I went with these teachers at our school that, let's take these local kids skiing. So I got really into skiing. But when you'd go skiing, it was all really posh kids up in the slopes, And I bought a pair of skis because I thought, well, I want to have my own skis. So I'd kind of walk down the road with my skis, but I felt really kind of a bit like someone's going to have a go at me because I've got skis. It just looks weird. No one walks around here with skis. And I remember actually one time being pulled up by the police. A police car stopped, and I was walking down the road, and the police got out and said, "Hey son, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he's like, "What are you doing with those skis?" And I said, "They're mine." I was probably 14 or something at the time, and they were like looking at me like, "What, are you crazy? What's someone round here doing with a pair of skis?" I think those would be the skis, actually. I think you used them, Norman.
Oh, I did,
and we did a video for a song called Hang On with Spike Jones.
Spike Jones video.
Yeah.
Spike Jones filmed me on those skis.
Yeah, years later. But, the police pulled me over, and it took me quite a while to convince them that they were my skis, because people around there didn't have skis. But I was walking down the road. So in order to walk down the road with a fucking pair of skis required a certain degree of confidence, because people would be like, "Where you going with the fucking skis, you big dick," or whatever, Yeah, we guys would be like, you throw things at you, check that fucking prick, fuck off, what you doing, you fucking, so you had to have a certain ballsiness to, walk down the road with a fucking pair of skis,
Yeah.
Anyway, but, this kind of, somehow that came to mind.
No. So you always were kind of just fearless. You just were kind of set up that way, and so that you were able to. Yeah, I'm gonna walk down. Yeah, I feel a little weird, but I'm still gonna walk down the street with skis. Yeah.
You think, well, I'm not gonna do it. I'll feel a little bit like. And years later, I'd be walking with a guitar case, and I think, oh God, somebody might steal my guitar. To try and walk down the road. I think I need to look confident. I think
walk the walk or ski the ski.
Yeah, you think, well, and I've kind of all years, and there's still something in me that thinks, from how I was when I was a kid and the background and stuff, I still kind of feel ready that if someone had a go at me, I could still think, I think I can still beat you in a fight. It's a crazy thing, but it's still part of it is still kind of in there, and I can't. I'd probably cry if anyone hit me now. You know what I mean? But it's still that little germ of thinking, yeah, well, if you have a go, it might not come out good for you. It's still in there.
Yeah. Oh man, thank you so much both for joining me today. What a delight this was.
Oh, not at all.
Oh, well,
thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been fun.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye, bye. Begin.